Hey everyone, Jason here from the Cupendium cast, and I just wanted to give you a quick little announcement before this episode starts. We are doing 2001: A Space Odyssey Part 1, and then next week we're doing Part 2. Both of these episodes were filmed a few months ago and were originally Patreon only, so you might hear different intro music, you might hear less cuts, some more mistakes. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that if it sounds a little different than the normal format, that is why, but I really enjoyed these episodes and wanted to get them out, so enjoy. Hey stargazers and moonwatchers, welcome back to part 2 of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
What you are about to behold is something wonderful, but first you need to go. The birth of a new world.
I am still joined by Erik Hanson of Cradle to the Grave podcast. Please go check that out. Hey, good to see you again, Erik.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, for us it's been 10 seconds, but for everybody else it's been a week.
Oh man, I was gonna go with the whole illusion that we came back 2 weeks later, man. But no,
Oh yeah.
we're we've paused for maybe 10 seconds, and now we're going on to part 2. But yes, it is good to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me here to talk about this incredible film. I'm having a blast talking about this film and really diving deep into it, which I've never done before. Now I've watched this movie a number of times over the years. Like I said in part 1, at first I didn't like it, and then it kind of grew on me, and now I love it. So it's been really cool to actually take time and go beat by beat through this film and discovering things that I never noticed before that you've brought up, that I'm realizing, you know what, maybe that's why they did that. So it's been really cool, man.
It is a lot of fun to break down these movies, especially having guests on, getting different perspectives, and catching things I didn't think of, like a lot of things you mentioned in our first half, and I'm sure you'll have some in this half. And it's that beauty of like different perspectives on things.
Oh, for sure.
And just things you don't think about, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's really cool. It can add all these new perspectives.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's jump back in. So where we left off with the last one is Hal was sort of not arguing. Basically, they were having some malfunctions with their satellite, the communications back to mission control on Earth. They were secretly talking in a pod about the possibility of having to shut down Hal if he was malfunctioning, but they didn't realize that Hal can read lips, which is going to turn out to be very bad for them. So now they are, or just Frank goes back out, I believe. Yeah. To put the satellite back into what is the AE-35 unit is what it's called. So this is where we get the quote accidental death of Frank. Right?
Oops.
Yeah. As he's out there putting things back on, Hal is in control of everything. So he is in control of Pool's pod during the EVA, which again means extravehicular, man, some words are just hard to say. Activity. EVA, everybody.
Just say EVA, man.
Yeah. Severing
it.
his oxygen supply and sends him adrift.
And that scene almost borders on horror, because I'm watching it, watched it again for our chat, and really paying a lot closer attention to the film because I'm going to talk about it with you. And watching that scene, the way Kubrick directs it and the way he edits it together, we don't actually see the contact that the pod makes with Pool. We see the aftermath, but before, we see the pod turning around like Michael Myers, right? And then his arms extend out, and then we get like a jump cut to the red eyeball of Hal, like pop pop pop. It's evil, man. It's scary, right? And then we cut to Bowman. He looks at the monitor or out the window, and he sees Pool's body tumbling away. It's like, oh shit. Like, yeah, it's a scary scene, man. It really shows the evil of Hal.
And it's done so well because it's complete silence.
Yes.
Complete silence. Yep.
Yes.
Also, an issue with this scene I've always had. All that's great. But after that, right, David goes out to get him, to retrieve him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but as we know, momentum doesn't slow down in space. You're not catching up to Frank. That dude is gone.
That's a good point, man. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Then we see Frank just kind of hanging, floating there, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
well, maybe the pods do have propulsion. So maybe he can move a little faster than how, but Frank's momentum is going to continue to add up, right? He's going to keep going faster and faster and faster.
I don't think someone can yell at us later if we're wrong. I don't think you go faster, but you will maintain your speed. And just think of this, like you see that happening by the time you're dressed in your own pod out the door. How far is that, dude? So unless those pods are really, really fast,
well, yeah, that's a very good point. And I think Arthur C. Clarke realized that because in the book, Bowman doesn't rescue Poole. He doesn't go back out and get him. That was all Kubrick for the movie.
I forgot that. Yeah.
There is no rescue of Poole. And a spoiler for 2061, Poole shows back up. His body.
That's in. I think that's in 3001.
Is it okay? 3001. His body is rescued by aliens. So that couldn't have happened if Arthur C. Clarke had done what Kubrick did, have Bowman go out and rescue him, bring him back to the ship, yada, yada, yada.
Well, remember, he doesn't actually get to bring him back to the ship, though.
That's true. He comes back. He rescues him somehow. He catches up with Poole.
Yeah.
We're going to let that one slide. Whatever.
Yeah.
Brings him back to, and he's like, open the pod bay doors, Hal. Hal's like, fuck you, Bo.
Yep. So I was going to say, yeah. So actually before that though, this is when, so Hal's off the chains now because while Bowman is out there attempting to retrieve Poole, he's locked out by Hal. And during this time is when he kills everyone else on ship.
Murders everybody, man.
Yep. So you see the signs of the lifelines of everybody just, flatlining as movies do. It shows computer malfunction on the screen and he's killing everybody. But yeah, this is where we get the famous line that is mocked all over the place where David says, open the pod bay doors, Hal.
Open the pod
and
bay
Hal
doors,
says, I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. And I feel like even if you haven't seen 2001, you've seen something that mimics this moment. This is where Hal kind of lets the ball drop of like, because David's like, I don't understand why not. And dude, again, Hal is just now he's being sassy because he's like, I think we both know why. And this is where he reveals like, I could read lips. This is a very sassy Hal where he's like, I heard what you were gonna do. Now this is good acting though, because this is where David has a look of like, oh fuck.
Yeah, that's
where
true.
He realizes, okay, shit.
Well, this is the most emotional this movie gets is this scene between Hal and Bowman and their interaction where Bowman's just like, how am I going to get into this ship? And Hal's like, you know what? This conversation is not going to serve any more purpose. Bye.
Yeah, for real. He's like, he literally is like, I got nothing more to say to you. Goodbye. So this is where he says he's going to re-enter the ship through, oh God, what was it? Like an emergency. Did I write it down?
The airlock.
Yeah, like the emergency airlock. And again, Hal's being super sassy. He's like, yeah, good luck without your helmet, dude. But he does it, and Kubrick actually, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I heard that can actually be done. Like you can survive in open space for like 10 or 15 seconds before your brain explodes or something happens, right? So it can be done.
And I did actually write that Kubrick consulted with NASA to ensure the accuracy of space vacuum exposure. So this whole scene was done essentially accurate to him going in, closing that door as fast as he could. And so even the realism of the explosive decompression is depicted. All that was like consulted to get it as real as possible, right?
Yeah. It's
Then
a good
we
scene,
get
man.
it is a great scene. All of this, honestly, is the most sort of
Action-packed the movie gets.
action-packed, but also just like, is stressful the right word? Like,
No, yeah, you could use stress.
The amount of what happens between just a computer and one person is the most. It's so stressful, because then it gets back in, and now it's weird, this shift, because Hal, Bowman's on his way to deactivate Hal, and Hal starts pleading with David to not do this, but again, his tone never changes, but you still feel it, you still believe it, you still this again, the whole thing during all these parts of the movies of the is Hal actually conscious, is he programmed that way? But this part really shifts towards the side of he's pleading with David, he's telling David he's afraid, right?
Yeah, he used the word "I'm afraid." How can a computer be afraid?
Exactly. David, there's some really cool shots in this scene where he's kind of floating in what is, I guess, like the main hardware of Hal, and he's like shutting him down, and during all this he's saying, "I'm afraid." He's saying things like, "I can feel it."
Do you feel sorry for Hal at this point?
A little bit, because again, this is where it makes you question, like,
I kind of do, because he becomes childlike, right?
He does.
As David is disconnecting him and pulling out all his chips, Hal is regressing back to his original chess program, or wherever he was originally programmed as, and then
he talks about when and so cool thing about that, I don't know if you knew this, I learned this today. So as Hal's getting shut down, like you said, he's reverting back, right? And he mentions a song he was taught, and he asked David if he would like him to sing it, and David says, "Yes, sing it to me." And the song he sings is Daisy Bell. What's cool is this was the first song ever performed by a computer. In 1961,
that's true.
IBM 7094 at Bell Labs was programmed to sing Daisy Bell in the earliest demonstration of computer speech synthesis. So I thought that was a really nice touch.
Yeah.
And just adds this haunting layer to this. So it's crazy, because Hal's done. It really is this sort of moral dilemma. Hal's done all these things, not really to be evil, but again, a conflict of his programming, which we learned more about that in 2010. Of it's like Hal didn't really malfunction. He just did what he calculated was the right thing, giving the programming and orders he was given. Yeah.
I want to highlight sound effects throughout the whole movie. There are sequences that are just sound effects, like the docking of the ship. You have a beep sound or some type of mechanical noise. And in this scene, when Bowman is disconnecting Hal, you have the breathing. Like, David doesn't say anything as Hal is pleading with him. You just hear right, and it's unnerving in a way, because it doesn't stop. Yeah, that creates tension. You don't need this soundtrack of some musical score that enhances the scene, like in Cameron's Aliens, you have that great musical score that adds to the tension and the excitement, like da, 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 da. In this scene, there's no music, it's just sound effects that add to the tension, and it's ongoing. You know what I'm talking about? It just keeps going and going and going and going. You're like, oh my god.
Yep. And that's the thing I think I forgot to mention is I do believe Hal has cut off the air supply in the ship. He's cut off the gravity.
Oh, yeah.
And so Bowen is actually in a spacesuit, and that's why we get the breathing, like we're hearing all that. So as he's shutting him down, so it's just, oh man, it's just really, really well done.
And I love how Bowman doesn't let Hal's pleading get to him.
Yep.
He knows this has to get done. There's no back and forth. There's no like, do you promise not to kill me, Hal?
Exactly. Yep. So exactly. And in doing so, in shutting down Hal, it uncovers a hidden video that was supposed to be shown to the crew upon arrival to Jupiter, which shows the true intent of the mission, right? That they found the monolith on the moon. It sent the signal to Jupiter, and it's like, now that you're all awake, well, they're not, other than Bowen, they're all dead. They tell the true meaning of their mission and why they're going out there. And then we cut, and that's it. That's it for that. And then we get to the next part of the film, Jupiter and beyond, right? I forget if they do a time lapse in this one. Do you remember? Do they show how long it's been?
No,
they don't. Okay.
We don't. Yeah. Again, it's like, kind of, you mentioned it, in part one, where when this last segment of the movie takes place, we're really disoriented as far as time goes, and how Bowman leaves Discovery 1 in the EVA pod.
David,
how does he go into?
Oh, how?
How does he go into the monolith? It's all really unsure what's going on, So yeah, I don't know how much time lasts between disconnection and what he does.
Right.
Probably not a lot.
Yeah. So getting to that, right? So now we're at Jupiter, and we see a colossal monolith floating
huge
near Jupiter. Yeah. And yeah, there's really, again, for the next, 20 minutes or so, there's going to be, actually, God, I don't think there's any more dialogue the rest of the movie.
No, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. There's no more dialogue the rest of this movie. And so, yeah, in the film, and by the way, at the end of this, because I think I forgot to mention I do a book to film comparison. So we will talk about differences, and this will be a part that we can get into of differences from the film and the book and everything. But as far as the movie goes, we see the giant monolith just floating near Jupiter, and yeah, we show him go out in the pod, and then suddenly here's that LSD trip we were talking about. So right. I hope you guys were ready from the intermission. But this was a part that always confused me. This might have been the part where I was like, because this whole ending is just such a turn from the rest of the movie, especially this part. So he goes into what is a Stargate that is never actually said in the movie. So I think as far as the movie, you're left to interpret however you want what is happening to David. But as we know from the book, he's going, the giant monolith essentially transforms into a Stargate, and he is just whipping through time. And what's cool, again, in the explanation of the book, he's actually seeing, I think, other planets, other dimensions, other universe, something crazy, right? Just warping all around him. Now in the movie, it's depicted as colors. There's some like inverted colors of landscapes and stuff. And for me, what always made me laugh in this scene is the facial expressions that David makes. Like very,
it's like a freeze frame of like,
yeah, very uncomfortable. And this goes on for a long time. And I do think it was scenes like this that when I was younger made me not like it, because I did feel this. I still feel this one goes on a little bit longer, but that's just personal preference, I think.
Yeah, I mean, watching it again, again, this must have blown people's minds in '68, right?
Right.
It still holds up. Mostly the first part of the Stargate sequence, when there's like parallel light shows that you can tell he's traveling down this tunnel, and it's really cool colors and different shapes that are zipping by. It's like, yeah, he's going through a wormhole. And then after that, we get just, there's no sense of movement. It's just like he can see galaxies and twisting kind of like colors and pools of stuff. That kind of goes on a little too long. Like they could have cut that out. But, overall, I really enjoy the Stargate sequence. a lot. I think it's really cool. And again, like the stuff that they were able to do back in 1968, it still holds up, man. Still hold it up.
Absolutely. And like I said, for this movie, it works, right? We're at this point, we're not strangers to long scenes of silence, if you will. And I think for me, though, I don't know. This is the one part I'm like, about half of this would have been fine. But it's still a very great visual scene. So David's traveling through this, and then this is where, like I said, I really had to. And you know what's funny though is this ending, because I've also read about how the ending is interpreted in the movie itself, because the ending is quite different in the book. It's the same but different. I enjoy both for different reasons, and we'll talk about the ending when we get to the book film comparison. So for now, we'll just do this one. But all of a sudden, David and his pod are just in this sort of like almost Victorian style room. It's very pretty, but it's also modern. It's like it's like glass floor, maybe. I don't know. Like the floor is like lit up.
It's like a disco floor.
Yeah. Ornament room. There's like just this really pretty bed. There's like two rooms, I think. There's like almost a dining area and then a bedroom. And in this part is where I never ever understood what was going on. But when I read about it, I actually loved what was. So before I say what I've read and what I believe is how it was meant to be, I would love how you interpret this ending, unless you know how it's meant to be, because I was always so confused by it. Because in this shot, we're gonna save the very, very end until we're there. But we get here, David is now in his pod looking out into this room, and suddenly David sees himself in his spacesuit, but a little bit older, right? And this continues throughout, where he keeps looking at himself, and every time he does, he's a little bit older. But before I get into like why that's happening, what do you take away from this part, Eric?
Well, again, there's 3 takeaways, right? Okay. Going back to 18-year-old Eric and his takeaway, the scene, like, what the hell?
That was mine for a long time. Yeah.
This movie sucks. And then middle-aged Eric. Okay, well, he's somehow he is aging quick. Maybe this Stargate is causing him to age rapidly and then turn into a baby. The end. Okay. I'm still confused. The older Eric, after, reading the novel and seeing other movies and rewatching this film multiple times, I have a better grasp on what is happening. And basically what is happening is that these aliens are giving him a familiar landscape or a familiar environment, like a lizard in an aquarium. You make it comfortable. You take the lizard out of its environment and you put it in this aquarium, but you're going to put inside the aquarium, you're going to put things that they recognize, like a branch, leaves and shit like that. So the aliens are doing the same thing with Bowman. They're putting him in an aquarium and putting things in here that he recognizes, like a dining room table and bookshelf, and a bed. And but he's aging, right? Every time he sees himself, he's getting older and older. And then he is transformed into the Star Child. And even now, I struggle with what exactly is their goal here. I mean, it still works. It's still really well done. I like the point of view, again, that Kubrick is doing, the way he edits this scene where we have a point of view of Bowman and he sees his old self, and then we cut and it's a new point of view of the old self, so on and so on and so on. It's really well done. But it can be confusing. It can be confusing. Yes.
So yeah, that's pretty close because I remember when I read. So as Erik said, like in this whole scene, you just see Bowen just continue to look at an older version of himself. So essentially, what's happening here, but I love it as just sort of a visual aspect for the audience. Bowen isn't actually looking at an older version of himself. This is just the way Kubrick shot this scene as a montage of him aging within this room. So he actually lives a full life within this room. And every time he looks back and now it's an older version, it was sort of it's just a montage of him aging, right? At least that's what I read at a source. Again, this could be just one of those open interpretation things, but that's what always confused me is like, why is he seeing himself? Because then, yeah, like at the very end of it, he's an old man on his deathbed, and then the monolith appears before him as he reaches out to it. And then the very last shot of the movie is a giant baby in
Star baby
or whatever. Yeah, the star child above Earth. And it's just like, what? And even reading the book, the last chapter explaining this, I still don't get it. I don't know if I'll ever get it. I'm sure someone can maybe break it down for me. But yeah, as Erik said, right, that's quite literally exactly it. So I don't know. I know we'll talk about more of this stuff as the differences from the book and the movie, but while we're here, because I didn't pick that up about as far as him being in a familiar like aquarium until reading the book. So is that actually something you picked up on before? Because once I read it, because in the book they actually say that's what's happening.
I picked up on it thanks to the movie Contact, which was based on the novel by Carl Sagan. Contact came out in '97 with Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey. Right. There's a very similar sequence when Foster's character goes through a Stargate and she encounters aliens. And the aliens, in order to make her feel comfortable, put her in an environment she's familiar with, which is that beach in Florida when she meets her dad. And it's not her dad, it's an alien disguised as her dad, right? But they're making it okay for her, things that she understands. And so when I saw Contact, like, oh shit, is that what's happening into 2001, right? And then, of course, reading the novel, that is what Arthur C. Clarke is telling you. It's like, yeah, the aliens are making this familiar setting so your mind doesn't explode looking at aliens.
And I'm actually now remembering, because it's been a moment since I read the book, but I remember, and it's probably fresher on your mind, as he's kind of coming to the end of this Stargate, he comes near like a sun or two suns, right? And I think he's having like a moment of being worried, like, oh shit, I'm going into the sun. The room builds around him, if I remember correctly, right? Does that sound familiar to you? That
I
sounds
believe
like,
so. Yeah, I believe so.
And then now he's in this room, and they actually say that within the book is like he's looking at, there's like magazines on the table, but like when he picks them up, they're empty, right? Or there's objects that resemble things he's familiar with, but they're not quite right. And that's just it, is like these aliens are trying to make him in a familiar place, but they don't exactly know what these things are. They just know he's familiar.
I think at one point he picks up a book and tries to read it, but the words don't make sense or something.
Maybe that's what, something like that. Yeah. Or he talks about the food, right? In the movie, we see him eating this like really nice fancy dinner.
Yeah.
But in the book, there's like a faucet with water. There's like cereal boxes and stuff and other foods, but everything is the same substance.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, it's food,
all artificial.
And so that's what he eats essentially. And I forget if in the book the monolith appears to him again. I don't remember how it ends in him becoming the Star Child. It's been a minute, but yeah, that's what the movie ends on. So it really is this just what just happened ending.
I know, man. I know sometimes I'm thinking about the end and I'm like, okay, so the monolith that appeared to Moonchild helped humans evolve. Now the monolith that appears in front of Bowman at the end, is this the further evolution of man they're rebooting humans as a star child. So Bowman dies and he's reborn as a star child. Is this the new evolution of man thanks to the interference once again of these aliens in the form of a monolith? Is this why they're there to help humans evolve even further? I don't know. Again, it's open to interpretation.
Yeah, and I love that, and that actually does sound familiar in context of the book, right? Because so far we only know of a few monoliths. There's the one in the beginning, which is TMA-0. There's the ones that the humans find, TMA-1 on the moon. There's the giant one by Jupiter that makes the Stargate. And that's the other thing too, is like, I love that we never really fully understand what these monoliths are capable of. Why is one a Stargate, you know? But then that's the thing too, is because like you are reminding me now of thoughts I've had when reading these. And it might be time for a reread of all of them actually, because there's probably a lot of things I'm forgetting. But because it leaves it open-ended with this, is this the next stage of human evolution? And I'm actually remembering, I think that's supposed to be sort of the thought process, right? But I feel like all that's taken away by 2010.
Well, yeah, we'll get into some of the books when we get to the book comparison, and the sequels, because there is a plan that these aliens have. That's
right. Yeah. But I guess if I think I know the plan you're talking about, I still wonder what's that got to do with the Star Child.
The Star Child, again, I mean, it's an awesome visual, you know, where you have that baby and then you have the Earth at the end and you have that awesome music. What's the name of that music? Zatarsa, or I can't pronounce that name.
I don't remember.
The main theme.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Something spoke Zastarwatra or something. So that, you know, we get that awesome ending. And yeah, again, you're just like, what the fuck just happened, man? What? Oh.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too, to remember, I think, as well, because like the book is very, and that's the cool thing. And I guess we'll save a lot of that for when we get to it. But the diff really is Kubrick did intentionally avoid definite explanations because he wanted to provoke thought and discussions and moments like this, whereas the book's a little more on the nose of like, this is what's happening. So it's great because it's like, for someone like me who like, I need to know what's going on here, I am like, what's happening? You can go read it if you like the idea of kind of creating, I think this is what's happening. Don't read the book, because the book will spell out things for you that otherwise you can, and he does it in such a way that it's like, no, this is what's happening. Like, he's telling you this is what's happening. So if you like the more thought-provoking and not really understanding, then just watch the movie, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And great. That is the end.
That's it, man. We did it. We did
it, man. But now we're going to get into what I call going to have me some fun. So there's a few more little segments I like to do with the guest, and they are science fiction versus science fact, where we talk about things within the movie that are science fiction, but then we kind of discuss what are our closest real life counterparts of what we have today. And then for the movies that do have books, we get into some book comparisons, right? And funny enough, 2001 is a great topic for right now with everything going on, because the first thing is artificial intelligence itself, right? So that being in the movie, obviously HAL 9000, right? Human-like reasoning, having its own emotions, its own feelings. Then there's the ethical discussions of what makes you alive, right? Is it the flesh? Is it the blood? Or is it your thought? Is it your consciousness? What determines what is alive? So, you know, our real life counterparts are a lot of modern AI advancements, machines that are learning, the neural networks. And then we have now our ethical considerations. What's crazy, though, is when all of us growing up thought of AI, I don't think any of us were ready for what we're actually getting. And I don't even really know if we can call what we call AI right now true AI, because it's still pulling from data from everywhere, right?
Right.
But it's funny because it to me it's showing a real fear of the use of AI, but not in a way we thought, not in a way of Terminators coming to kill us, but I fear AI takes away a lot of creativity for people to take the easy way out, at least with how it's being used right now.
Absolutely, man. And there's a big pushback against AI in the artistic community, where people can just type in input into chat GPT and boom, there's a new novel, or boom, there's a new piece of a new painting I just did, or whatever. So and you're right, it's taking from existing sources. So it is plagiarism, right? When you're using AI now. So a lot of people, a lot of, writers and artists, there is a big pushback against this AI. And I agree, like if you want to do something creative, don't cheat, right? Actually paint the shit, right? Don't go to a computer and have the computer do all the work for you.
Yeah. As an artist myself, it's part of the fun is creating it, coming up with the idea, seeing it come to life. So to just put in a prompt and there it is, that's not why I do it,
Right.
But what's really scary about it too is, the complaints with it is like, yeah, but you could tell an AI is AI. You could tell an AI video is AI. You could tell when something's using AI. It's like, yeah, right now, but give it 5 years, give it 10 years.
Exactly.
Like this is just the beginning. Look at cell phones a decade ago compared to what we have now. Like maybe we can tell right now, but we're going to reach a point where we can't tell. Like every technology when it starts out isn't at its full potential yet. So that's what's scary is like now when artists use, like a lot of bands come under fire when they use AI art for an album, which they should come under fire. But the point is the more you dissect the photo, you can really start to tell. But again, that's just right now. Give it 5 years. And that's what scares me is when it becomes indistinguishable and people just want to take the easy way out. And for me, it's really a bummer when artists like musicians fight back when they use AI art and they're like, but the music's still real. It's like, yeah, dude, but as an artist, you should know how it feels to
somebody rips off your shit.
Yeah, not only like rips off your shit, because you could have the argument of like, yeah, it's pulled from a source, but so are a lot of things. Like my ideas spark from another idea. Sure. But if all bands just no longer hired artists, then how many artists are like losing gigs, not now they're not able to do their art. It's still art, just a different platform. And I remember it's funny too, because there was a band, I can't think of their name right now, but they posted their new album that was AI and one of their old albums from the 80s. And they're like, are you really telling me the one from the 80s looks better? And it's funny because they thought they were making a point, but it's like, yes, it does. Like it might not be as clean, quote, but you can tell this was made by a person. There's life to it.
Exactly.
That the AI is lacking. So again, this is the interesting thing is this is much different than we all thought when we thought we were going to get computers like HAL 9000. And again, I don't consider this true AI. We call it AI, but it's still pulling from a database, whereas the idea of AI is to have its own consciousness, right?
Well, we got, we also have self-driving cars. I don't know if you've been to San Francisco lately,
dude,
Jason.
Yes, but tripped me out.
there are self-driving cars that are all over that city. And that's a form of AI, which is very similar to what HAL is doing in 2001. He is controlling machinery. Eventually, there's going to be self-driving trucks. It's going to affect the trucking industry, so truckers are going to be out of a job. You go into McDonald's lately, Jason, there's nobody, there's no humans that work there anymore. You go to a kiosk, you type in what you want, and a human will bring it to you. But eventually, it's just going to slide out like it does in 2001, where they put some buttons and boop, here comes your food. So that's all AI, man. AI is affecting every aspect of our lives, whether we know it or not. You're being tracked, you're being watched. your phone is watching you. You got Hal in your
Big
pocket
brother,
right
baby.
now, dude.
Yeah. Oh, here, it's funny. The audience won't be able to see this, but that's my phone.
Oh, you there? See, dude.
My background is HAL
man.
9000. Yeah. So, yeah.
And eventually, it's all going to lead to Armageddon, bro. Okay, Terminator was right. That shit.
Self-driving cars, man. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's this interesting thing because we as science fiction fans, we watch these movies, and we're like excited for it, but then it's actually really more terrifying than these great sci-fi films make it seem like. The idea of self-driving cars, but now there's no more need for Uber drivers, and yeah, Uber is a new thing. You could argue there's always an argument on both sides, right? Uber is a new thing that hasn't been around that long. So what were people doing before that? But someone said it best, like, if it's going to continue to move in this direction, I think a good answer for it is, like you see, I don't remember the actual term for it, but it happens in like Star Trek or the Orville, essentially an economy that no longer relies on money, because if you're going to continue to take things away from people so they can literally just live, then there needs to be a solution for that. Like, people deserve to live. I mean, that seems like a simple thing to say, but if all food restaurants, yeah, like if restaurants are going to continue to go in this direction of machinery, that is how many people out of a job. If driving, there needs to be fine. You know what? The sci-fi kid in me is like, hell yeah, I love it, but there needs to be a solution for the people. And what that is, I don't know. I'm not the guy to make that decision.
My biggest fear is, you put this AI technology in charge of defense, weapons, and that shit that I was joking about Terminator could become a reality if AI decides, if AI becomes sentient enough to decide that humans are in the way and they have control over the missiles. I mean, it's not that far off, dude.
It's not that far off. And I think about this often. How many movies do we make about this? How many stories, video games, what have you? We all know of the real possibility of it, and we just keep going in that direction anyways. And, funny enough, I watched Terminator 2 last night, completely unrelated. It just kind of came on. So I was like, sure, I'll watch that. And yeah, one thing he says in that movie when John Connor asks if we're going to be okay, he's like, it's in your nature to destroy yourselves. And I feel like that's very real. Because we know the fears of it, but we do it. And what's funny is we do it for the convenience of it. It's convenient now, but not so convenient when the bombs are dropping, right? So,
no.
Yeah. But I don't know. So, moving on to other fun things, science fiction versus science fact. Another thing I wrote is space travel and colonization, right? So in the movie, we have routine commercial flights at this point. So literally the space station outside of Earth, there's a Hilton. So the idea is like going there is no big deal anymore, right? Space and there's moon bases, right? So people going to the moon like it's no big deal. What I can think of as far as so far a real life counterpart is essentially the International Space Station. I think is about as close as we've gotten. There's plans for a lunar base, right? We talk about it. There's plans of one day colonizing Mars, but how far off those are, no clue, right? So to me, the closest thing I could think of is just the space station. So I don't know what you got on that.
I mean, I think you're right, dude. Like I feel like space exploration, it was on the fast track for a while. And then maybe after the Challenger disaster, things really slowed down and we kind of pulled back. I feel like it's taken a long time to get back up where it needs to go. Like there were plans to go to Mars decades ago, but it's just recently really getting kickstarted again. it could be an actual, thing that happens where, yeah, maybe we do send a manned mission to Mars. Like, and I believe it's going to happen. They're planning a manned mission to the moon again. And so I don't know what happened where the space race just slowed down. But we have the ability to do these things. It costs a lot of money also, so that comes into play. You have warring countries, that all shit comes into play. There's a lot of drama that happens here on Earth that we got to take care of first before we head to Jupiter. But yeah, I don't know.
I was actually gonna kind of say that myself too. Is it almost goes back to a little bit of what we were just talking about, because these ideas are great. These ideas of exploring space, going further out. I do believe if we are a species that hopes to survive long term, then we have no choice, because the inevitable fact is our sun will die one day, our Earth will die. So if we want to survive long term, we have no choice. But there is that discussion of, why don't we fix Earth before that? I feel both simultaneously are important if we're looking long term. But again, it goes back to, like, we're doing all these things with AI, but how are we taking care of the people? It would almost be the same if we're putting all this into space travel, but how are we taking care of the people here? Right. Again, we make so many movies. People like you and I, we sit here and talk about this on a podcast for a Patreon. But like, real changes are what need to happen, where we know, but nothing happens. Like, I don't know, it's a scary world, man. And then there's just the reality of space travel compared to how it is in movies. It will not be as glamorous. I don't know if it can ever be as glamorous. It's just, maybe we're not meant to, I don't know.
Maybe. I feel like back in the 60s, when Kennedy's like, we're gonna go to the moon. All right. And the whole country was behind this shit, man. And there was a big push, and money was put towards this, and people helping out and volunteering, and a lot of people died in order to get to the moon. Right. But we did it. And maybe like, okay, we did that. That's good enough. And maybe we lost the passion, because during the 70s, there were many more missions to the moon that nobody gave a shit about. Like, Apollo 14 landed on the moon again, whatever, like, next.
Well,
so I don't know.
That's how it goes. It's funny, but to bring up something not quite related, but when Jurassic World came out, they kind of rebooted the Jurassic Park franchise. They sort of touched on that, about how, like, they needed to keep creating these more extreme dinosaurs to keep people interested, because that's just how we are.
Yeah.
Like, and that's how it'd probably be, like, the idea of a Jurassic Park. Oh shit, they brought the dinos back. Well, you go see them, and now I did that already.
Right. Right.
And that's how this would be, like, oh shit, like, we're going to the moon. Like, and again, the only reason it was such a big deal is, like you said, the space race. We were up against, was it China or Russia?
Russia.
Yeah, to get there first. That was our motivation, was to be first. And then we did it. Hey, we're first. We don't care anymore. And that's the thing too, is, like, again, we think of these movies and we're like, wow, imagine a space station with a Hilton or a moon base. To these people in this fictional world, this is he's just going to work. Like, he was on the video call with his daughter, like, well, I'm traveling right now. Like, he's just traveling. Like, we're like, oh my God. And that's how it would become. So it's an interesting thing of, because if you think about it, right, like 50s and 60s for sure was like a highlight of sci-fi films, so many classics, and it was during the space race and all that, and we still get them, but I feel like there was a difference. Like, science fiction films, like, for those 20 years, that was the thing, and where were we? Colonization, all that fun
I think
stuff.
you're right, dude. Like, eventually, we need to find an Earth-like planet out there, and there are scientists that are exploring other galaxies. They have ways of locating Earth-like planets, that could be potentially our next home, thousands of generations later. It's not gonna happen overnight. We're not gonna make it there. Our grandkids aren't gonna make it there, but eventually we're gonna have to find a way to leave Earth. Or
if we want to survive. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that brings me, funny enough, that was a great segue, Eric, to the next thing.
You're welcome.
Hibernation and long distance space travel. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the hibernation and long distance space travel, right? So in this movie and like many others is the cryogenic sleep to endure long missions. Because that's another thing to think about too, is if we even ever reach this point, right? I think the next sort of like even solar system is so many light years away. Like there's the reality of like whoever goes on these, they're never coming back. They're never seen who they love again. It's not like in Guardians of the Galaxy where you whip from one place to the other in the matter of minutes. And Interstellar is a great movie that comes to mind with how they sort of handle relativity and all that stuff. Like, they're on that one planet near the black hole, and it's like 1 hour there is like 7 years or something on Earth. That to take into place, right? Yeah. Or to take into account.
I think what needs to happen is that we need to make a ship like Battlestar Galactica, where it's a floating city or a ship that is a city, right? And people will travel to another star, and they will live, and they will die, and they will be born on this ship that is going to take decades, a millennia to get to the other place. And it needs to be, self-sufficient. There needs to be like areas where you can farm and you can grow, plants to survive. But it's a generational thing, right? The people who leave on that ship will not make it to the destination, but their ancestors will. Right. I think that's because I don't think we can travel faster than light, right? I don't think we can go through a wormhole. I don't know, maybe. But the only way we're going to get there is in some type of ship that does travel close, to the speed of light or extremely fast. But it's still going to take, light years. It's going to take a long time to get to these other planets. And we got to play the long game, in order for the human race to survive.
I agree, and I love that. And that's the thing too is even the closest planets to us are probably not habitable. So we find one that's just perfect, because we can find ones that are close. Doesn't mean they're going to work. So how far is that? How far away is that? How do we get there? But I think that's what it comes down to is like one day, if the species wants to survive, that is the only option. But I guess it'd be cool if we got along here first. I don't know, maybe.
If we don't destroy ourselves before then, hopefully that we can work things out here. Yeah.
Oh man, I guess we'll see. We won't see. Someone will see. Yeah.
No.
All right. So movie book comparisons, right? We did talk about a few things as we went along to sort of paint the picture of stuff, but one big thing is the destination of this movie. So in the movie, they go to Jupiter. In the book, they're actually going to Saturn's moon, Lepidus. That the monolith is actually on this moon. It's not floating in space like in the movie. It's actually on the moon. And the reason they ended up not doing it is Kubrick wasn't satisfied with the models they were making for Saturn. So he wasn't happy with
the rings. They couldn't get the rings right or something.
Yeah. So he just went for Jupiter and decided just to have the monolith sort of floating out there in space. But originally it was on Saturn's moon, Lepidus. That is another thing though. The whole sequence, the whole ending sequence, I do like more in the book. Up until he gets to the room, I actually think I do like the version better in the movie, because again, in the book it's very spelled out for you. There's no guessing what's happening, but just the explanation of the Stargate, what he's seen, what he's witnessing, and then again, it on the moon itself is just, it was very well done. into into all that. Hal himself, his breakdown, right? We've kind of dissected it, but in the book, again, it provides way more insight into his internal conflict, which we don't really get till the second movie when that scientist sort of explains it.
Right.
In the movie, he leaves the motives a little more ambiguous, and maybe that answers my question to you earlier of like, why did Hal suddenly flip, because it does seem very random in the movie for me, or not random, but no one really did anything yet that we had seen on screen to make Hal start having these doubts.
Right.
He just suddenly did. But in the book, they do talk about it a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Well,
like you said, like the book and the movie was almost done simultaneously. Like
they were. Yep.
Kubrick got together with Clark. It's like, okay, I want you to write this movie for me. I'm going to do both at the same time. So, I mean, the book does follow the movie pretty closely, or the movie follows the book pretty closely. There are differences, like you mentioned. They go to Jupiter instead of Saturn. There's more detail on the Stargate stuff in the end. But overall, I mean, it plays out pretty close. They're really parallel. The funny thing is, though, reading the sequels, when you go to 2010 and on, Clark goes back and retrofits those novels to fit Kubrick's version. So
that's right.
In 2010, Saturn is not the destination that Bowman and Poole were going to. It was Jupiter.
I forgot about that. That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Which I thought was cool. I mean, he's basically saying, yeah, okay, we're going to follow the movie version, not my book version, which is, you know what? That's cool, because most people have seen the movie and not read the book.
Exactly. And yeah, that does make more sense because, Jupiter plays a big part in the second book and movie.
Does.
And so, yeah, I had forgotten that. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like this book movie comparison is one of the few where it's like there was hard to find things because, again, they were written together. They were meant to go together. Because another thing I had was like the ending, right? The ending is more detailed of Bowen's transformation, whereas the movie encourages personal interpretation. But the same idea is still happening of what happens to Bowen. Right. It's just in the book, it's a little more spelled out for you of what exactly is happening. Because even the intro of the movie, going back to Dawn of Man, it's pretty much played out just like the book. The only thing the book offers is better explanation, but that doesn't necessarily mean different. It's just you're understanding a little better of what exactly is going on and why these things are happening. Actually, though, it was done so well. Like I mentioned, I wrote a song called Moonwatcher about the character because the one thing the book did do is make me really love this character.
Me too. Yeah.
And
you really get you get a feeling for these early humans and their plight that they're going through more than in the movie. You don't really connect with them. You're like, oh, they're apes, whatever. They're smashing bones and touching monoliths. But yeah, you're right. In the book, like you really get to know these characters.
Yep. And it was just done so well. And sort of the internal conflict within Moonwatcher, because he's changing, but and it's just done so well because, again, it's that slow burn of intelligence because Moonwatcher's changing. He doesn't know he's changing. It's not like suddenly he's like, oh, wow, this thing's making me smarter. He's just suddenly is doing things instinctively, like picking up the bone and realizing, oh. And I won't say it exactly right because I don't remember, but I loved the ending of that section when he's like, a millennia will go by and no one will ever know this was the moment where things changed. And he's like, Moonwatcher will never know what exactly happened to him. And it's just, he just started to do these things. And I don't know, it was just done really well. And my singer at the time, Heather Michelle, like I never feel bad saying this because I didn't write them, but she wrote the lyrics. So I highlighted a bunch of pinpoints within that section I wanted touched on in the song. And she did such an amazing job of like conveying the emotion I was feeling for this character in such a great way. And Yeah, it's just really good. Just I love that character, and just watching the movie, it's such a almost insignificant character as far as you wouldn't connect with it, but Arthur did a great job of making, like you said, making you feel for these early ancestors.
Well, yeah, in the novel, Moonwatcher is a presence that is there throughout the whole novel, even though he isn't, when they go to 2001 in the future, but his influence is still there because we're all descendant from Moonwatcher. Moonwatcher's actions led to what is happening later, millions of years later. You know what I mean? So it's a through line that Arthur C. Clarke is showing us. It's like it all started with Moonwatcher and it ends with the Star Child, but they're all connected. This is all part of, evolution, and you pick up on that more in the book than you do in the movie, I feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think that's all I got.
I mean, you have to watch. I would really recommend doing both, reading the book or listening to it, audio books, and watching the movie, because they're two parts of the same whole, right? It's they go together like chocolate and peanut butter, right? If you have them both together, man, it tastes great. But they give you different interpretations of the same thing. And so I would really recommend, if you haven't listened or read 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke, do yourself a favor and check it out. It's not a long book. None of his novels are that long.
They're actually, for the subject matters, they're really easy reads.
Yeah. It's very accessible. And when I first was listening to 2001, I was just expecting, you know what, I'm just gonna check out the first novel and I'm good. But after that, I'm like, you know what? I want to continue this journey. And I listened, 2010, 2061, and 3001, and they're all enjoyable. And the story, it really, like I said, it all connects. Every novel connects, and it expands, and it just gets cooler and cooler, and characters come back that you thought were dead, and it's really neat. It's a really neat novel or series, and you get more insight of these aliens that created the monoliths and their overall plans for Earth and Europa, which is one of the moons of Saturn, right? It's like
Jupiter.
They wanted, of Jupiter. So you want to know why the aliens are doing what they're doing? Read the book.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Eric, I think that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for
dude, this was
this morning.
Epic. Yeah. It was epic.
A lot of fun. So remember, everybody, please check out Cradle to the Grave. Eric, before we sign off, if there's just anything else you want to tell people, you want them to know about you, please put it out there. Any reminders?
Oh yeah, for sure, man. I also wrote a novel called Death Machine. You can buy it off of Amazon. Just Google Death Machine by Erik Hanson. First thing that pops up will be Amazon. It's a novel I wrote a couple years ago, and it's basically an autobiography of my youth growing up in the 80s during the Satanic Panic, but I throw in the Zodiac Killer and mix things up a little bit. I was really happy with the results, and so I'm currently working on my second novel right now, which is a vampire novel that should be out hopefully late next year, early 2026. And then again, Cradle to the Grave is still chugging along, man. Every week I'm throwing out new episodes. I try to get one every week out there. And yeah, dude. Yeah. I need to be creative. I feel like during the pandemic, I was in a band, and the pandemic hit, and there was no places for bands to play. So like, man, how am I going to channel my creativity? I'll write a book. So that's what I did. Wrote it during the pandemic, self-published it, and really happy with it. So check it out, Death Machine.
Check out Death Machine. Check out Cradle to the Grave. Erik, it's been a blast. I always have a good time chatting with you, man.
Thanks, dude.
I can't wait till the next one, whether it's on this or your podcast. But either way, we definitely got to do it again.
Absolutely, for sure.
All right, stargazers and moon watchers. I'll see you on the next one.
My God, it's full of stars.